6 wheels. Angular bodywork that looks like it was carved by someone who spent too long staring at stealth aircraft. And a presence so aggressive, it makes every other motorhome on the road look like it gave up. Before we go any further, full transparency up front. What you are looking at is a fictional concept generated by AI. No manufacturer, no price tag, no delivery date. Just a vision. But the design language embedded in this thing, sophisticated enough to deserve a serious breakdown. Here is what we are covering today. We are going to walk the exterior, and there is a lot to unpack just on the outside. Then we are going inside, where the proportions tell a very specific story about how the designer intended you to actually live in this. Then powertrain and tech, because a vehicle that looks like this is making a statement about propulsion too. And finally, the verdict, including one design decision at the rear axle section that I genuinely think most people are going to miss entirely. I am saving that for when we get there. Let's start at the front. That front face does not ask for your attention. It takes it. The first thing you notice, and you cannot not notice it, is the geometric LED signature running across the lower fascia and wrapping around those angular headlight housings. These are not soft, welcoming arcs. They are hard hexagonal cuts, sharp intersecting planes. This is a design language that is communicating one thing very clearly. This vehicle does not yield. It does not soften its edges for you. You come to it. That matters, by the way. Design language is a first impression system. Before this concept moves a single meter, it has already told you who it is for. The person living in this motorhome is not looking to blend into a campsite. They are not apologizing for their scale. And the front face is the opening sentence of that statement. Now look at the windshield angle. Steeper rake than you typically see on a Class A motorhome. And that rake is deliberate. Aerodynamically, a more vertical screen creates more drag at highway speeds, which is the traditional penalty. But what it gives you in return is something far more valuable at this size class: commanding visibility. Sitting behind that screen, elevated with that panoramic sweep of glass, you are not driving this concept. You are presiding over the road. That is a specific feeling, and the designer understood it. The side profile is where this concept starts to reveal its real ambitions.
The roofline is flat and clean, almost brutally so. No dramatic curves, no sweeping arcs toward the rear. Just a disciplined horizontal line from the cab brake all the way to the tail. That decision tells you something about the interior ceiling logic, but I am going to hold that thought until we get inside, because it connects to something important. What I want to focus on here is the glass arrangement on the side. 3 side windows, rectangular, evenly spaced, dark tinted, flush mounted. No chrome surrounds, no decorative frames, just dark glass set into white bodywork with surgical precision. The glass-to-body ratio on the side is actually quite low compared to what you might expect at this concept positioning level, and that is an interesting choice. It suggests the designer prioritized privacy and wall surface inside over natural light exposure. We will see if that tracks when we read the interior. The white bodywork itself. Under this studio lighting, and notice how the render uses the environment deliberately, the pearl white finish is doing real work. Light is rolling across those panel faces in long, clean sweeps. No complex surface interruptions breaking up the reflection. This is a panel philosophy borrowed from high-end architectural design. Large, uninterrupted surfaces that read as confident rather than busy. The contrast trim elements, the black roof cap, the dark lower cladding band, the window surrounds, create a two-tone graphic that gives the body visual structure without needing ornamental detail. Now, the wheels. 6 of them. And this is the detail most people clock and then move past without really understanding what it means. This is a tandem rear axle configuration. 2 axles at the rear, plus the front steer axle. You do not put 3 axles on a concept vehicle for visual drama alone. A tandem rear axle setup is an engineering statement. It means the designer imagined a gross vehicle weight that a single rear axle could not responsibly handle. We are talking about a living space dense enough in materials, systems, battery capacity if this goes electric, that it needs the load distribution spread across 2 rear axle lines. The tire choice confirms this. These are all-terrain profiles, significant sidewall, not the low-profile touring tires you see on highway-biased coaches. This concept is imagining surfaces beyond tarmac. Which brings me to what is happening at that rear axle section, the detail I mentioned at the top. I am going to get to it, but first, let us go inside. Here is how I read interiors from exterior data, because this concept does not give us a rendered interior view. You use what the outside tells you and you follow the logic. Start with ceiling height. The roofline sits high. Visually, I would estimate this concept is running close to 4 meters in overall height, possibly slightly above. Reference the wheel diameter against the body height. Those all-terrain tires are running somewhere in the 285 to 315 width range on what appear to be 20-inch rims. That is roughly 900 to 950 millimeters of total tire diameter. Scale that against the body height and you are looking at a habitable ceiling somewhere between 2.1 and 2.3 meters. That is stand-up height. Full stand-up, no ducking, no compromise. In a motorhome at this size class, that matters more than almost any other single measurement, because ceiling height is the primary variable that determines whether a space feels like a vehicle or feels like a room. This feels like a room by design. Now, zone layout. The habitable length from the cab divider to the rear wall looks to be roughly 8 to 9 meters based on overall vehicle proportions. Here is how I would divide that logically based on what the exterior signals suggest. The cockpit zone occupies the front. Behind the cab divider, and there will be a divider here because the designer has created a distinct cab architecture, you get your first transition zone. This is probably a short lounge or seating area, positioned to take advantage of the side windows nearest the cab. Midship is your primary living area. The 3 side windows suggest a continuous open living zone, lounge into kitchen, with those windows providing visual connection to the outside. In a design that prioritizes wall surface over glass area, you would expect interior wall treatments to do heavy lifting here. Think deeply upholstered panels, integrated lighting in recesses, material warmth compensating for what the window area does not provide. The kitchen placement, based on the exterior storage access panels on the near side lower bodywork, is almost certainly mid to rear on the service side. Those lower access hatches tell you where the utility runs: water systems, gas or induction feeds, drainage. Kitchen placement follows utility placement. It always does. Sleeping quarters, rear of midship, ahead of the rear axle cluster. This is the optimal position because it puts the bed over the rear suspension system, which on a tandem axle coach actually provides a slightly smoother ride characteristic than a midships due to the load distribution. A fixed transverse bed here, running wall to wall, would give you a sleeping surface wide enough that orientation to the vehicle's travel axis doesn't compromise comfort. You are not sleeping in a vehicle. You are sleeping despite being in one.
Bathroom. Rear corner, almost certainly. A fixed rear bathroom configuration at this vehicle length gives you the space for a genuine wet room, not a combined toilet shower cubicle, an actual walk-in shower with separation. The tandem axle configuration underneath creates a raised floor section at the rear. That step up into the bathroom is actually an asset here because it creates a spatial threshold that mentally separates the sleeping zone from the hygiene zone. Smart use of a structural constraint. The cockpit. Let's go back there for a moment because that windscreen angle tells a story. Steep, panoramic, elevated. This is not a driver's cockpit designed for spirited inputs. It is a command position. I would expect a full-width dash treatment, probably a continuous surface wrapping driver to passenger with embedded digital instrumentation. Given the concept's overall positioning, you would be looking at a driver experience borrowed more from super yacht helm design than from truck cab logic. Living in a space like this would feel, and I want you to actually imagine this, like waking up in a high-end hotel room that is somehow moving through landscape. The ceiling height gives you the psychological sense of freedom. The flat roofline means no visual compression overhead. The dark glass windows act as framed views rather than continuous transparency. You choose your moment to look out rather than being perpetually exposed to the outside world. It is introverted luxury, confident enough in its own interior quality that it does not need to constantly reference the exterior.
If this were ever engineered for reality, the powertrain conversation starts and ends in one place: full electric. Here is why. A vehicle at this mass, and we are talking conservatively 18,000 to 22,000 kilograms at curb weight for something of this size and specification, does not benefit from a traditional diesel powertrain at a concept positioning level. Diesel gives you range, it gives you simplicity, but it also gives you vibration, noise, and an emissions profile that is fundamentally incompatible with the experience this design is promising. You do not design a cockpit that feels like a super yacht helm and then put a diesel engine under the floor. Full electric at this size class means serious battery architecture. In a near-future production scenario, you would be looking at a distributed, floor-mounted pack, similar logic to what heavy EV coach manufacturers are currently deploying, somewhere in the 800 to 1,000 kilowatt-hour range.
That sounds enormous, but scale it against the Volvo FM Electric or the BYD heavy coach platforms currently in service, and it is not science fiction. It is aggressive engineering with existing technology. The tandem rear axle setup opens up something interesting from a propulsion standpoint. In a dual motor configuration, you could assign independent motors to each rear axle, creating genuine torque vectoring capability. For a vehicle of this width and mass, torque vectoring on two rear axles is not a performance feature. It is a handling safety feature. It is what allows something this large to behave predictably on cambered roads, on loose surfaces, in crosswind conditions.
Solar roof. And I would expect a full roof panel array here, given that flat, uninterrupted roofline. Not as primary propulsion, the numbers simply do not support that at this vehicle mass. But as an off-grid interior system sustainer, entirely viable. Climate management, lighting, connectivity, water heating, a quality roof array running 8 to 10 kilowatts peak could sustain interior systems for extended stationary periods without grid connection or generator noise. The smart systems layer, learning climate, predictive route-based charging, autonomous highway capability, these are not fantasy at this concept level. They are table stakes for 2030 horizon luxury mobility. Here is my honest take. What this concept does genuinely well is stance. I have analyzed a lot of AI-generated motorhome concepts, and most of them struggle with the same problem. They look like a luxury coach someone stretched. This one does not have that problem. The tandem axle configuration, the tire choice, the aggressive front fascia, together they create something that reads as purpose-built rather than repurposed. That is genuinely hard to achieve in a single render, and the designer achieved it. What seems impractical, and I want to be honest here, is the glass strategy on the side. 3 small windows on a habitable length of 8+ meters is a choice that will divide opinion, and I think it should. The privacy argument holds up. The wall surface argument holds up. But natural light in a mobile living space is not purely aesthetic. It is psychological. Extended time in a low natural light interior, regardless of how sophisticated the artificial lighting is, creates a specific kind of fatigue. For weekend use, you probably never notice. For full-time or long-haul living, I think you would feel the absence of those extra windows within a week. The most impressive single detail, and this is the one I mentioned at the top, is the lower body cladding treatment at the tandem rear axle section. Most concepts treat the wheel arch area as a packaging problem to be minimized. This one treats it as a design feature. The angular cladding that wraps around both rear axle sets creates a visual rhythm, a repeating geometric sequence that ties the rear quarter of the vehicle to the front facial language. It is cohesive, it is deliberate, and almost nobody is talking about it. One thing I would change, the side windows. Not more of them necessarily, but larger. Floor-to-ceiling slot windows, the full height of the habitable wall, at the same 3 positions. Keep the dark tint for privacy, but let the light in. The roofline is doing the heavy structural work. The glass does not need to be structural. Let it breathe. What this concept signals about luxury mobility, and I think this is the bigger conversation worth having, is a shift away from the resort hotel on wheels aesthetic that has dominated the Class A market for the last decade. This is not trying to look like a Ritz-Carlton on tires. It is trying to look like something that could go somewhere a Ritz-Carlton cannot. That combination of ultra-luxury interior promise with genuine all-terrain capability signaling,
That is where the most interesting design conversation in mobile living is happening right now.
Here is my question for you, and I genuinely want to know where you land on this. 6 all-terrain wheels and rough road capability, or that same budget spent on a larger glass area and a lighter, more resort-style interior? Which version of this concept would you actually want to live in? Drop your answer below. The split on that question is usually more interesting than people expect. If this is the kind of analysis you come to YouTube for, the detail reading, the design logic, the honest critique, subscribing is simply the most efficient way to not miss the next one. New concepts, same format. See you on the next one.